What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So Spider-Man 2 received a new patch on May 9th, just yesterday at time of making this video, patch number 9. And it brings with it a focus to Steam Deck and adjusting the default settings and some performance behind the scenes, I guess, to kind of help the game. So I re-downloaded it, wanted to jump in and take a look and see what was going on. Now, as far as the actual patch notes, there's not a lot here, but we'll take a quick look. And it says, we've implemented several rendering optimizations to enhance performance on Steam Deck. They've also updated the default preset to enable dynamic resolution scaling for a more stable performance experience on the deck. Also, we've got various optimizations for Steam Deck, the improved settings, and then various stability improvements listed in here and some stuff for direct storage. So I've got the game set to its default settings to start with. So if we go into the all settings here, display and graphics, I'm actually on the default. So we're at 800p, of course, here, and we have frame generation off, but we will take a look at that. FSR 3 is on, and we're using that dynamic resolution scaling. That's their default 30 there, and then they default to the very low preset. Basically, I would normally adjust this a little bit myself. These aren't necessarily my recommended settings, but I wanted to see what their default settings were now with their improvements on the game and see what was happening. Now, if we jump into some actual gameplay with these settings, I typically like to take a few things up from very low, but this is the way they have it here, and ultimately it's going to work to try to keep you at 30 FPS or allow it to go above. And you could also cap this at 30 if you wanted to as well, but it's definitely going to do a lot of dynamic scaling when things get busy and we're not just sitting here on the building. But if we look here, we're 37, 38 FPS, and if we turn off their dynamic resolution scaling and just use FSR 3 on quality, we'll get quite a boost just sitting here of about 12 FPS. But if we were to start getting into some heavier action areas and it didn't dynamically scale, it would actually go under an FPS what we would get with dynamic on. If we switch over and turn frame generation on, and we go ahead and turn on the manual GPU clock for the Steam Deck so that that works better or more properly here, usually what we have to do on the deck, I'll click that on, 1600, and we'll hover around 7980 for frame gen. Again, though, if you get busy in other areas, it's going to be lower than that, but you can opt to use that if you wanted to here. So let's go ahead and turn things back to normal to their default settings. Resolution scaling's back on. We'll get back to that 37 or so FPS here, and we'll get to moving around and see what things do there. But yeah, that's basically how they have things set up now. So if you just jump into the game and use their new default settings with their performance optimizations, this is what you're going to be looking at. Now, when things get busy and it starts to really scale that resolution down to quality, balanced performance, ultra performance, whatever it's going to do there for your FPS, you can definitely see it and tell, and things do get pretty messy and a lot of ghosting and pixelating and things like that happen, but it's doing that to try to maintain the frame rate. Again, if I use FSR 3 at quality or balanced here, it will look better, but it ultimately will start to get into the 20s a lot more often than it does with the dynamic. But just know what you're getting into here. This is what they've opted to do with Spider-Man 2 on the Steam Deck if you're running things at default. And remember, sitting still with frame gen, we were around 80 FPS, but of course, if you're moving around, that can easily get down to 50 to 60 FPS, which makes frame generation not feel near as good. So I still don't recommend necessarily using it in the game on the Steam Deck, but it's there if you want to jump into it and check it out. Now again, though, things can be pretty clean or pretty messy depending on where you're at and what's happening. And this is one of those examples here where a lot of smearing and stuff happens as we get closer to the dirt and the fog and stuff here that's happening from Sandman, rather. And yeah, but these are just things to be aware of. Now, I did get into some side-by-side stuff with launch performance versus now at the same exact low settings, not very low. These were my launch settings. And ultimately, I would say that performance is a little lower now as far as just straight up FPS when it comes to a lot of the areas I was checking out. Not by a lot. But if you're using their default settings and not my own settings, the game is more stable and does run better, as they say. But if I get into my own stuff and compare it, it's not necessarily running better than it was at launch in certain areas, but it is more stable. But if you go with their very low and dynamic resolution scaling, yes, indeed, you do get more FPS and a better experience than what my side-by-sides were. So that's pretty much where you're at for Spider-Man 2 now on the Steam Deck. It's cool they're still focused on it, updating it, and I do like when games get Steam Deck specific updates. It makes those fun to go in and take a look at. Anyways, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Pretty short. Just wanted to take a quick look here at the update. As always, thanks a lot for coming to watch, and I'll see you in the next one.